What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of a Kings related podcast, wherever you may be. Thank you, as always, for joining me for another edition of the show. And whether you are watching on YouTube, Spotify, or listening on your favorite podcast platform, do us a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, leave a comment down below. That will be much appreciated. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about what the Sacramento Kings can learn from the San Antonio Spurs. And ladies and gentlemen, we are 1 week out from the 2026 NBA draft. I'll give you who is the pick, and I'll give you my draft board for the Sacramento Kings and that 7th overall pick. But first, the biggest lesson this organization can learn from one of the best teams in the NBA, in the San Antonio Spurs, isn't about tanking or getting lucky in the NBA draft lottery. It's about having a clear organizational vision. And that is pick a direction and commit to it. The Spurs have never lived in the middle for long periods of time. And when they were contenders, they pushed to win titles around Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, David Robinson, Sean Elliott, to name a few. And it helps to have a Hall of Fame head coach. And when that era ended for San Antonio, they accepted the rebuild. Accumulated young talent, developed players, and eventually they got lucky with the number 1 overall pick and they landed Victor Wembanyama. The Kings have spent years trying to balance competing now while also preparing for the future, and that often leaves a team stuck in the middle where the Kings are now. 2, development must be a priority, and the Spurs are one of the best organizations in the NBA at player development. They consistently turn late picks, second rounders, and overlooked prospects into contributors. For the Kings, this is especially relevant because you have repeatedly talked about the importance of developing Keegan Murray, Nick Clifford, Maxime Reynaud, Dylan Cardwell, Devin Carter, and now your upcoming 7th overall pick. And the Sacramento Kings can't keep drafting players and then burying them on their bench. Young players in this league, they need real NBA minutes to grow. And 3, you build around that core timeline. San Antonio's roster makes sense because everyone fits the same timeline around Victor Wembanyama. When you have players like Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Dylan Harpo, a young core like that. Sacramento, they need to decide. Keegan Murray, the centerpiece of this next era. Is this number 7 overall pick part of that long-term core? Or Nick Clifford, Devin Carter, Max Reynaud, they part of this future going forward? And if the answer is yes to all of that, then every move the Kings make should be evaluated through those lenses. 4th, the most important thing, establish the identity. For years, you knew exactly what Spurs basketball looked like. Tough defense, ball movement, selfless play, accountability, player development. what's the Kings' identity right now? Because the most successful Kings teams of recent years, they had a clear offensive identity. But the defense, the toughness, and the consistency have fluctuated, to say the least. An ideal Kings identity: toughness, athleticism, defensive versatility, fast pace, unselfish basketball. We've heard Doug Christie and Scott Perry talk about that. Can you imagine a lineup featuring Keegan Murray, Nick Clifford, Devin Carter, and the right young point guard could help establish that? And the fifth most important one, in my opinion: patience. The Spurs didn't panic after they lost their championship core team. They didn't chase shortcuts. They trusted their process. And Sacramento, they have often reacted year to year, making moves designed to solve immediate problems rather building towards a long-term vision. And sometimes the hardest move is not making that quick fix. The bottom line is, folks, what the Kings should learn from San Antonio is simple. Have a plan, commit to that plan, develop your young players, build around that timeline, and create a clear identity. And for the 2026 Sacramento Kings, that probably means prioritizing Keegan Murray, maximizing the value of that 7th overall pick, giving meaningful opportunities to guys like Nick Clifford, Max Reynaud, Dylan Cardwell, and Devin Carter, if he's still on this team, rather than continuing to operate between rebuilding and contending, because that's how franchises build sustainable success instead of chasing it year after year after year. So, like, the NBA draft is a week away, and I right now I'm going to break down the options that this team has with that 7th overall pick. I don't believe they should be moving back, giving up future draft capital to do that. I think they should stay at 7 and get their future franchise point guard, because after a disappointing 22 win season, this draft class and this draft feels like one of the biggest moments for the future of this franchise. Scott Perry and his front office, they have the opportunity to add a potential cornerstone piece with that 7th overall pick. The big question is simple. Do you take the best player available? Yes, you do. You do not draft specifically for need, because we've seen the Kings do that over and over again, and look where it's gotten them in the past. So we're going to break down the top prospects connected to the Kings, what I like about each player, and how much stock we should actually put into all the rumors, the workouts, the mock drafts, and the smoke screens flying around, especially this time of year. So let's just start it off with the name that continues to generate the most buzz around the Kings, and that is Arkansas freshman guard Darius Acuff Jr. And reports throughout this pre-draft process has linked Acuff to Sacramento, and several trusted analysts out there believe the Kings are very interested in this freshman guard. Because if you watch Acuff, it's easy to see why. He's a natural scorer with an elite handle, deep shooting range, creative shot maker, can score at all three levels, comfortable operating out of the pick and roll. And for a Sacramento team that desperately needs long-term creation in that backcourt, Acuff checks a lot of those boxes. And what I love most is his confidence. The moment never seems too big for Acuff. When the game gets tight, he wants that basketball. Now the concerns are obvious. The defense. His size isn't ideal, and there are legitimate questions about how he'll hold up defensively against the bigger NBA guards at the next level. But if you read what scouts have praised about his offensive upside, while continuing to debate his defensive limitations, and if the Kings believe they need that future league guard, Acuff is very much in that conversation. And according to Sean Cunningham, Darius Acuff did come by late last week for a pre-draft workout. They snuck him in. No announcement, no local media to work him out one-on-one. And another guy that is linked to the Kings, who also came in last week, according to multiple reports, is Kingston Flemings. And with him and Acuff, the only top 10 prospects, as we know, to come through Sacramento for a pre-draft workout, if Darius Acuff is the scorer, Kingston Flemings is the complete basketball player. In fact, if you are asking me, it feels Kingston Flemings feels more like a Doug Christie and Scott Perry type of player. He's tough, competitive, athletic, defensive-minded, and he impacts winning. And Kingston Flemings is projected in that range where the Kings are at 7 and has been connected throughout this process. Scott Perry even met with Flemings in San Antonio with his family. And I love the fit alongside Devin, Keegan, and even Nick Clifford. Imagine that perimeter defense, the toughness, the athleticism. But the biggest question I have with Kingston Flemings is, can he become a true offensive engine? Or is he ultimately a combo guard? Because if you're drafting a point guard with that 7th overall pick, you want someone who can eventually run an NBA offense. And still, Kingston Flemings feels like one of the safest picks in that range for the Sacramento Kings. And he's someone who I've loved since the beginning. Now let's talk about one of the fastest risers in this class. That is Illinois' Keaton Wagler. And according to also reports, the Kings are looking maybe to bring him in for a workout. At 6'5", with the shooting ability, the playmaking instincts, and excellent offensive feel, Wagler has become one of the most intriguing prospects in this entire draft. He averaged 18 points a game while shooting 40% from downtown, and he impressed scouts with his offensive versatility. But what jumps off the screen when you watch tape is the shooting, the basketball IQ, and the ability to play on or off the ball. And in today's NBA, that's incredibly valuable because the concerns for Keaton Wagler are the same with Acuff. Defensively, he doesn't have elite physical tools. Keaton Wagler needs to get stronger, and there are questions about whether he's a primary creator or more of a secondary playmaker. But if the Kings believe they can develop him right, the offensive upside is absolutely very real. Brayden Burries is another name that keeps showing up in conversations around Sacramento. He's one of the younger players in this draft class and with one of the biggest upside swings available in that range. That is frequently mentioned among the top prospects to be available in that 7 to 10 range. What I like about Brayden Burries is his versatility. He can handle, score, and also create. He's not as polished as some of the other guards in this draft that I've discussed about, but the upside is undeniable. And if the Kings want a swing for a star potential, rather immediate production, Brayden Burries could become a serious option with that 7th pick. Just a few other additional prospects worth monitoring as we are 1 week out. Louisville's Mikael Brown Jr. I know there's some questions about the back injury, but Brown might be the most gifted passer in this entire range in the draft. He's creative, dynamic, and flashy. And if Sacramento is looking for a pure playmaking upside, then Mikael Brown deserves some consideration. But I don't think he'll be there at 7. He's explosive downhill attacks, who puts pressure on defenses and gets into the paint consistently. Another name that I've seen mostly fall is Nate Ament from Tennessee, a bigger wing with tremendous long-term upside. And if Sacramento decides to go away from the guard position, the reality is that this draft is loaded with talent. And at number 7, Sacramento should have multiple qualities options available for them. So how much should we believe in this draft buzz leading up to next Tuesday? Like, you got the rumors, the workouts, the leaks, the anonymous reports. Every year, teams put out information for a reason. Sometimes they're trying to create leverage. Sometimes they're trying to hide their real targets in the draft. And sometimes they're just gathering information. And sometimes it's completely smokescreens. So while it's fun for us fans to discuss these reports linking the Kings to like Acuff, Flemings, Wagler, or anyone else, I wouldn't overreact to everything you see on the internet. Because remember, teams don't tell you who they actually want. They tell you what they want you to think. The truth will be revealed on draft night next Tuesday. So, if this draft was tonight, here's how I would realistically rank the top prospects for Sacramento. 1, Kingston Flemings, who I have loved since the beginning. 2, Darius Acuff Jr. 3, Keaton Wagler. 4, Brayden Burries. 5, Mikael Brown Jr. Like, Flemings just gives you the toughness, the defense, athleticism, and winning basketball. Sound familiar? Like those 6 pillars that we always hear about from this team. Acuff gives you that star-level offensive upside. Keaton Wagler gives you the elite shooting that you desperately need and the offensive versatility. Burries gives you that long-term upside. Mikael Brown Jr. gives you the creativity and the playmaking. And the good news, I don't think the Kings can go wrong. Because this is exactly why having the 7th overall pick in a loaded draft class matters. Like if Darius Acuff and Kingston Flemings are on the board when the Kings are on the clock, I think they go Acuff with that 7th pick if they're both on the board. If Acuff is off the board, I think they go Flemings with that 7th pick. So the question is, who will it be? Now I want to hear from you. Who should the Sacramento Kings draft next Tuesday with that 7th overall pick? Darius Acuff, Kingston Flemings, Keaton Wagler, Brayden Burries, or someone else entirely that we did not mention on this episode. Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the Kings related podcast here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts on audio form for daily Sacramento Kings coverage, draft analysis, offseason rumors, and post-game reactions all year round. But thank you as always for joining me on the Kings related podcast. And as always, go Kings, light the beam, and we will see you next time for a post NBA draft episode.